Today we are talking about the 2016 Tony Awards and what exactly happened. Sorry, I meant to say 2017. Anyways, let's get right into it. With flops and many shows, this was certainly a very interesting season. To begin, we're going with Emile, which was a very big flop. The show had various tryouts before going to Broadway and had Philippa Sue, who was most recently known for playing Angelica Schuyler in Hamilton. The musical opened at the Walter Kerr Theater, where Hadestown is, and began previews on March 9th before officially closing on May 21st after only 56 performances. Now, the interesting thing about this is the show received mixed reviews, and whilst they weren't pans, the show received no Tony nominations and clearly wasn't connecting with audiences. I truly believe this is because in a season overshadowed with big budget box office shows such as Anastasia, Bronx Tale, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, some shows were bound to not make it, and Emile was clearly one of those. Maybe in a less competitive season, Emile would have lasted longer. I personally haven't listened to it or really given a deep dive into Emile or what exactly happened, but it didn't connect with audiences, and once again, a very competitive season. That is the same thing to be said for Groundhog Day. Now, Groundhog Day had been tried and tried again in development, and in August of 2003, Stephen Sondheim said that his next project might be it, but eventually said that to make a musical of Groundhog Day would be a glide to the lily. It cannot be improved. That was until Danny Rubin decided to come on to write the book, and shortly afterwards, the composers and directors of Matilda the Musical, which was a huge success, including Tim Minchin, decided to all come together and see if they could make Groundhog Day into a fully fledged show. The show's performances began at the Old Vic in 2016, and Andy Call would play the lead role of Phil Connors. The show was nominated for various Oliver Awards and won for Best New Musical and Best Actor for Andy Call. Now, the show was set to transfer to Broadway in March of 2017. However, the musical may not make it to Broadway in January 2017 because the lead producer Scott Rudin, who, again, did Beetlejuice, withdrew from the production, but it was still able to make the March 2017 set dates. The show premiered on Broadway at the August Wilson Theater on April 17th, 2017. Now, the show received raves from critics, and many said there was lots of buzz coming from it from London. But Groundhog Day was overshadowed with such hits as Come From Away, Dear Evan Hansen, and Natasha Pierre, and The Great Comet of 1812. Now, an interesting tidbit is on the preview of April 14th, Carl injured himself on stage during the number Philanthropy, tearing his ligaments, but continued the performances with a cane. Andy Call, despite returned to production on April 17th, so he could be considered for the Tony Awards. Bill Murray even attended a production of the performance of the show, and despite this, the show still closed on September 17th after only 32 previews and 176 performances. A national tour was planned, but this was eventually scrapped with how complex the show was in terms of its scenic design. Now, the scenic design broke down various times, and the show was nefarious for having multiple sit-downs, and in its first preview, the show had to be stopped because there were too many technical issues, and they had to have a concert version instead. I personally think Groundhog Day was an amazing show, and it definitely should have won Best Musical had Dear Evan Hansen not been in this season. The music, the lyrics, it was totally amazing. Tim Minchin was burned from this and has not returned to Broadway or America since, and it's totally understandable. I think, again, this show was in a very crowded, competitive season. Personally, I thought the marketing of the show wasn't that great, and I don't think the message of the show was conveyed well. I think, personally, people didn't see Groundhog Day as a musical, despite it being really good, and situations like this happen with shows like SpongeBob and Shrek. People simply don't think they're good, and then they see it and they're great, but at that point, they're a little too late, and the show was able to close. And then we got A Bronx Tale. Now, A Bronx Tale was based on the very popular film starring Robert De Niro. The musical began previews on Broadway on November 3rd before officially opening on December 1st, 2016 at the Long Acre Theater. The show closed on August 5th, 2018 after 700 performances and almost 2 years on the Broadway. Now, despite running for 2 years, the show received mixed reviews from critics and received no Tony nominations. But I do think this is the power of how successful shows can be when there's a big brand name attached to it, such as A Bronx Tale. Now, didn't hear a lot about it, but it had a successful US tour, and yeah. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is an interesting one. The show premiered in London in 2013, directed by Sam Mendes. The show received really mixed reviews from critics, and people didn't think it was going to last long. However, it closed on January 7th, 2017, after almost 4 years on the West End, and a rework version was set to hit Broadway, but a new creative team was assembled, including Jack O'Brien, who is a legendary Broadway director, but recently, not really. He directed Charlie and Carousel, two of the biggest flops on Broadway. Both cost a lot and both were big disappointments. Now in the beginning, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory did amazing at the box office, but once critic reviews came out, audiences started to go away from the show, seeing as Charlie and the Chocolate Factory did not have the spectacle and eye-popping visuals that are to be expected. Instead, it came off as a cheap, manufactured company product that was only there to make money. I saw the show, and to be quite honest, I wish I hadn't. The show was good and had a really great cast, including Christian Borle, Jackie Hoffman, Michael Rotella, so many amazing actors and actresses that were simply put in the production that did not live up to the standards of Broadway, something that was more off-Broadway than Broadway. A US tour was launched, but even that closed early, and there were various international productions around the world, and it received no Tony nominations, and closed very shortly in January of 2018. And then we've got David Hansen, which all of you guys know, it premiered in DC in 2015, around the same time that BMO Show was. It premiered off Broadway in 2016, and then goes for the Broadway in November of 2016. Ben Platt won the Tony Award. It won various Tonys, including Best Musical. There's various international productions, Canadian, London productions. It received universal acclaim, and is definitely not just a show, but a brand. No, I definitely do think Evan Hansen is will become the most dated show this season, and already that's starting to show in terms of box office, with them not doing the numbers they used to do. However, Evan Hansen is still a very successful piece of theater, and what else is there to say? It's Evan Hansen. Come From Away was another show that was poised to win Best Musical had Evan Hansen not been in this season. The production had various shows, including Gander, Washington, D.C., Toronto, before officially settling down on Broadway in February of 2017. The show received not rave reviews from critics, but positive ones, and critics and audiences really loved it. But the reason why the show succeeded so much was because it had that NYC representation, and that's why audiences loved the show so much, despite only winning one Tony Award for Christopher Ashley for Best Direction of the Musical. The show was still nominated for a healthy amount of Tony Awards, including Best Musical. A film adaptation is in the works, and it's had a London production and US tours across the world. And to actually appear in The Great Comet of 1812 is a very interesting situation. I already made a huge video, but in summary, it had various productions, including at the AOT, Alice Novus, and was a show that was presented in the round as this very unique experience. And people were saying this was better than Hamilton. Critics loved this kind of theater. It was very New York, not vaudeville, but just completely out of the box and not what Broadway is thought of. The show received the most Tony nominations, but only brought home 2, and closed in September of 2017 due to a controversy replacing Oak, who was in Hamilton, with a white actor, Mandy Patinkin, because ticket sales were dropping after they failed to receive Best Musical and Josh Groban at the show. What happened with Great Comet was a tragedy, and will go down in history as one of the most, tragic events ever. Sorry guys, I'm at a lost state of my head, but my video on it you can check out. And they were going to do a US tour, but with how costly the show was, it was never going to happen. But it is a shame that such a beautiful show only lasted for such a short amount of time. And then we got War Paint. Not a lot to say here. It was with Patti LuPone, and it ran for a decent amount of time, and somehow managed to recoup its investment, and received 4 Tony nominations, but did not win any, and did okay at the box office. But mainly it was a show that was bland, dry, and best forgotten. Anastasia. Now, Anastasia is one of the most successful shows apart from Evan Hansen and Come From Away. The show has had various international productions and premiered at the Broadway Theater on March 23rd, 2017. Despite receiving mixed reviews and no Tony nominations, played for almost 3 years on the Broadway and did really well. And that was mainly due to the fact that it's a princess musical, it's not Disney, plus it's for everyone. And then we get on to the musical revivals. Now, I'm gonna just say I saw Cats, and let me tell you, what a waste of money. The show was basically a replica of the original 1980s production, and, it was boring. And then there was the movie, and, we don't have to go there for this video. Got Falsettos, which has become huge in the Stan fan community because I had Christian Borle, Andrew Reynolds, and despite being a limited engagement, it has received much notoriety, and there is a professionally filmed production, which you can rent or buy on iTunes, I believe. We had Hello Dolly, which was the biggest revival, arguably, of the century. Hello Dolly with Bette Midler, David Hyde Pierce, and Scott Rudin producing. This show was very hyped up. The ticket prices rivaled Hamilton. Regularly making $2 million, Hello Dolly was easily the most successful Broadway musical of that year, and also was the most successful revival probably in the past decade. Now, sadly, when Bette left, Bodinette came in, and the show did not do as well and eventually closed, but there was a US tour, but then that was canceled because of the virus, but Kelly Comello was in the show as Hello Dolly. Now, personally, this season was jam-packed with controversy, action, disappointments, but at the end of the day, I truly see this season as the most memorable one.